Hello and welcome to episode 13 of Film Stop. Today is a really fun episode. I am super excited, A, because Avengers Endgame is coming out end of this week, and B, because my friend and banter, Bo Zhang, is on this episode with us to discuss Avengers Infinity War. Hey, Bo.
Banterer? Yeah, so I've just never been described as a banterer before. That's interesting. That's a little new for me. Um, Thank you for that, I think.
Wait, I think it's a compliment, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, sure, I guess. I don't know. It's just not something you hear every day. But
Listen,
okay,
what we
we'll
do
go with
here
it.
is super important. This
Yeah,
is
well,
really
clearly.
important stuff, and clearly the world depends on this. So,
Yes, agreed.
um,
Definitely.
okay, so the point of this episode is that we're really going to go over Infinity War, just recap, prep. It's kind of like homework, and then put some predictions together and go over some theories that we may have for um, Endgame. And if you haven't seen Infinity War, major spoilers ahead. So I don't know why you're even listening to this podcast. If you are, I greatly appreciate it. Please subscribe. But we will be diving into major spoilers here, and also the everything building up after Infinity War. I guess Ant Man and Captain America. We will be diving into spoilers of those two movies too. I will lay down alerts for those two, but
You mean
really, it's
Captain
kind of
Marvel?
wait, yeah, did I say Captain America? Sorry,
Uh,
Captain Marvel.
okay.
Sorry. I stand corrected. Captain Marvel, and even though I'm going to say spoiler alerts when I start talking about those movies, I think organically we'll bring in plots and some points, subplots from those movies into the discussion. So this is just a general warning for anything beyond Infinity War. I guess before that too, but I don't know how much we'll dive into the back end of things. Okay, anything you want to say, Bo? I kind of just went through everything
Yeah,
real quick.
no, that's about it, right? Do we want to just hop right into Infinity Wars then?
All right, awesome. Yeah, so let's jump into a quick recap. So, Bo, you can correct me at any point here, but the movie begins with the ending of Thor, where an Asgardian ship has been destroyed by by Thanos, sorry, and his people, including Ebony Maw and some other, just I guess cheap characters. Um, and at this point, Loki dies and Heimdall dies too, and Thanos gets I believe he gets the Power Stone or the
He had the Power Stone. He gets the Tesseract slash Space Stone.
Space Stone. Sorry, Space Stone. Yes. At which point he or Bruce Banner goes back to Earth to tell Doctor Strange, Iron Man, and all these other dudes that hey, Thanos is coming. Watch out. The other stones that he doesn't have are Mind Stone, Time Stone, Soul Stone, and am I missing anything else? Reality Stone.
Reality,
Right.
yes.
Yeah. So there's really multiple storylines happening. One is of Thor with the Guardians of the Galaxy bunch, especially with Rabbit. He ends up going with Rabbit to, who is really Rocket Raccoon, to Nevedalir to get a new Stormbreaker or new hammer, which is the Stormbreaker,
So it's really an
and
axe, but that's okay.
yeah, yeah. Um, with a twig as a handle. But basically, he kind of almost dies in the process of getting this. And that's one storyline, one arc that kind of converges with the rest of them as Thanos makes his way back to Earth. The other storyline is of Iron Man, Doctor Strange, Spider Man, and Nebula ending up, and Star Lord and Gamora ending up, or not Gamora, but the others ending up on Titan to fight Thanos. And this is where Thanos comes over to take the Time Stone. And this is where, Doctor Strange, even though, just few scenes before he makes a promise that he'll never give up the Time Stone, even if it means Iron Man and Spider Man dying, ends up does giving the stone away, and basically he says that we're in the end game now, and this is the only way. And in order to save Tony Stark's life, he basically gives it away, but he also says that this is the only way.
Yeah, and that is relevant because before the fight, Doctor Strange goes through something like 14 million something alternate
Right.
possibilities and timelines, and only saw one that where they win. So
Mhm.
this is presumably that timeline.
Right. And yeah, and also in order to get, so this is where Thanos, I keep saying Thor. Thanos gets the time stone, but he also before this goes to uh, what's that, Vormir, to get the soul stone, where he sacrifices Gamora's life, which is important because just because of that act, Star Lord does a stupid thing and basically, in the heat of the moment, ruins the plan. And pretty much, I can wager to say that he pretty much causes half the extinction of humanity. Um, so that's important. And then the other part of it is that before all of this, Thanos goes to nowhere. Nowhere is where he gets the Reality Stone. Anyways, all of this converges on Earth at Wakanda, where the Mind Stone is on Vision's head, who is pretty much useless as a character in the entire movie, except for the fact that he's carrying the Mind Stone on his forehead.
Yeah, I mean the man got stabbed. Like, what do you want from him, right? So
Well, yes, but I thought he's like a really strong character. Turns out, he got stabbed.
yeah, that's what
And
Ratface said too, and
yeah,
he's the guy who stabbed him. So
um, yeah, and so basically, at this place, Shuri, who is Black Panther's T'Challa's sister, is trying to extract the powers of the stone or understand the stone better so that Vision can get a life beyond, even if the stone is not there. And then Scarlet Witch destroys the stone, and at which point Thanos arrives, and Thanos basically just turns back time and still gets the stone. Thor completes his arc and takes that axe and sticks it in Thanos's heart. Thanos basically giving the most important line of the movie, saying, "You should have gone for the head," and still does the snap. At which point, seemingly enough, 50% of humanity is wiped off the face of the universe. I guess. Did I miss anything in that?
that's about it. You did mention arc. I think what was interesting about this movie is that in some ways, I mean, you could say that Thor had somewhat of an arc, and yeah, it's there, but it's more interesting to view it with Thanos as the
Yeah.
protagonist, in my point of view. And he has the most going on in terms of character development and just really progression in general, which is a very interesting way to put this. Right, you go into it and you think he's the bad guy, but it's almost written like he's the good guy, except
Hmm.
not really.
Yeah, it's his perspective. The entire movie is from
Hmm.
his perspective, and they really do a good job at justifying what and why he's thinking about it this way. Although I have some issues with his plan in general, if he thinks that.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like any kind of comic book stuff, you don't want to think too hard at this, right? Because if you have all the stones, you can do anything. Why not just increase resources?
Right, right.
Oh well.
And like, who's to say like 50%? Okay, wiping off 50% of living organisms also means, and I think Kevin Feige at MC MCU confirmed that it also includes plants and stuff like that. So if you're just going to reduce all resources by 50% as well, who's to say that's going to do any good?
Yeah.
Especially because of Gamora's planet. At Gamora's planet, the example he keeps citing, that one time that it did work, he was actually picking the people who die and who live, or at least he was just doing it to humans and not the resources. So yeah, I have issues with his plan.
But the bottom line is the Avengers lost, and it's really interesting because they generally individual. Well, I say Avengers, anyone who's not Thanos, and they lost, but they were really doing everything. If you look at each individual character, they were very much that character, right? They didn't really do anything differently.
Mm,
So from that perspective, they were themselves. But why they lost, and you could kind of attribute it, is that they didn't really fight. They didn't do the
together,
whole power of teamwork thing and
yeah.
fight together. They kind of were doing their own thing, and at the end of the day, they couldn't prevent this thing from happening.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with it. And I think that that was the point that the writers and the directors are trying to make with that too, and also
Right.
kind of just making it a Thanos film, but then just if you look at it mainly, well, yeah. definitely the original Avengers survive. Of course, there's Captain America and
Yes,
Ant-Man, but they're kind of making this their
Captain
journey,
Marvel.
which, well, yeah, dang it. I keep saying Captain America and then Thor for Thanos. Captain
Captain
Marvel.
America survives as well, but yeah,
Yes, he
it's
does. But yeah, so I think that this movie in Endgame is going to be basically their perspective and their journey now.
I agree.
So, talking about Ant Man and Captain Marvel, kind of not doing a deep recap of those two, but again, spoilers, guys. If you haven't seen these two movies, again, do not listen to this part or anything in the future on this episode. So basically, Ant Man and the Wasp, they developed the fact that there is a quantum quantum machine or quantum
Quantum
realm
Realm. Yeah.
accessing machine of some sort to get the old Wasp out, Michelle Pfeiffer out, and they established the rules of the place where, if you stay too long or you get whatever discombobulated, then you're gonna end up in a time vortex, and who's to say where you're gonna end up after that. But what really is the important part of that movie is at the end, Scott Scott Lang is inside the machine, inside the quantum realm, collecting energy when the world outside perishes, including Pym, his wife, and their daughter. And when he comes out, he still has the van and the machine, which we see, I think, in the Infinity or Endgame trailer. That's, I guess, the most important part. Is that you? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say so. The whole thing is quantum something something. I mean, basically, comic book magic, but that's fine.
Yeah. And then Captain Marvel is really just establishing the hero or superhero and bringing into, I guess, the forefront how important and strong she is and important she will be going forward, and I'm sure for the next few phases. Speaking of which, there is a complete review and discussion earlier in, I think, earlier episodes, so please do go back and listen to that if you haven't heard it already. And Bo, while we're on this subject, I would want to bring up a feedback that we have gotten based on that episode, specifically based on our, let me say, harsh critique of Brie Larson and her performance. Would you want to justify yourself a little bit more on that,
Justify myself.
real quick?
Well, I mean, if you listen to it, it becomes really obvious that I'm just like a raging misogynist, and I hate the idea of Marvel having a female lead as a character, and that's why I just completely beat up Brie Larson on that particular discussion. No, come on, guys, seriously. Hey, it's just my opinion. I don't think she. And looking back, I do wonder whether it was more the acting or the directing. You could make a case either way. I don't know. Wasn't obviously on set for that. Um, but I still kind of hold by my opinion that her character, that whole thing it was probably what held the movie back some, in my opinion, in the context of what it was. So, yeah, I'm not really apologizing for it.
Hmm. And I mean, I hear you, and I think that I was thinking about this a little bit more, and I can clearly categorize three things, three buckets into why I'm not a huge fan of her in that movie. One is I just felt like it was inconsistent. I think that in parts she was a lot more. She had a lot more personality. In parts she just didn't, and I get that some people sort of played devil's advocate and said, "Oh, that character is confused, so she is playing a confused character." I get that, but I think that in some places her dialogue delivery, that one specific dialogue that is very jarring to me is, "I'm not going to fight the war. I'm going to end it." That the way she plays is that versus how she plays the other scenes and delivers other dialogues just didn't seem consistent to me. And I actually love Brie Larson in other movies. I loved her in Room and in other stuff too. I think in Castle or something, Glass Castle, I believe. I think she's a good actress. And then the second category that I would want to say is like, I think Bo, you hit upon it, bad direction. I do think that the way she was dealing with her loss and her grief and her problems was very was very inconsistent from the way other people were dealing with their loss and grief. So just that one Skrull, who is played by Bill Mendelsohn, right? He
Mm,
finds his entire family at the end, and you realize that, oh, it's his arc, that he's been looking for that family, or he's been trying to protect them. And yet that moment is very strong and powerful, and you connect with him. And yet before that, whenever he was playing a menacing dude, or he was playing a character who was very evil, or he was cracking jokes, you were with him all the way. He was still very he still had the personality, which is the third point that I would make, the lack of personality. So if you think of any
yeah.
movie, any superhero movie, like the first ones, I guess, Iron Man, Captain America, First Avenger, all of, or actually even Thor for that reason, all of these movies, no matter what you think of the movie, there was clear personality in those actors playing those characters.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely echo that. I mean, Brie, in my opinion, and again, I don't know whether it's the acting or the direction, maybe a combination of both, but she just lacked that kind of on-screen charisma and persona that we see from most of the other superhero things in the superhero genre.
Right. All right. So let's bury that topic now. Let's go into Infinity War. Back to Infinity War, I guess, and let's talk a little bit about some of the plot choices that they made. And I think we covered Thanos' plan. We covered Doctor Strange's strange choice. But how do you think? I guess how do you think Captain Marvel fits into Infinity War's universe moving forward? Like you've seen the trailers and stuff
It,
like that.
in the MCU.
In yeah, but I think more so just in this ecosystem of these two movies.
Mm. Well, I mean, from a larger perspective of the MCU, and this is kind of going into some other topics as well, but I think it's pretty clear that there's parallels between her and Captain America. I mean, outside of the name, they have similar in some ways
Hmm.
character traits rather. So I think there's going to be a bit of a transition there within Endgame. But in terms of that kind of, I don't know, leadership role or maybe moral compass, however you want to put that, for the core Avengers team. I mean, she's going to be an important role. I I think it would be wise for them to not make the role overpowering though, because again,
Hmm.
going back
I
to
agree.
the original formula, it's about the power of teamwork. Well, if it's, Captain Marvel comes in and becomes like comic book Jesus, then that it doesn't that doesn't really work as well, I think.
Well, and I mean, this is, I guess, a good segue into theories, right? Do you think that she is going to be the one to quote unquote defeat Thanos? I really hope not, in my opinion.
I don't think so. I think it's going to be a final sacrifice, self-sacrifice type thing by one of two characters. Might as well get into that.
Right.
I think one of either Tony Stark or Captain America is going to die in this movie. One of them. And if I had to pick, I think it would make more sense for Captain America to die. One, because there's this whole very clear successor type thing, and the other is that he doesn't really have a whole lot more going on in the world, right? So
Mm,
Tony, he has Pepper, he has this big corporation that he's a part of, and in every Avengers movie so far, he's shown a willingness to do this whole self-sacrifice thing. So that's not really an issue. I think it would kind of work better, and especially this whole transition between Captain America and Captain Marvel in terms of that mantle of essential leadership and responsibility over the Avengers team. I think that would make sense.
I think that is. I mean, I think you make a good point there, but I do feel like with Captain America's complete, I guess, MCU arc coming to
Hmm.
this 10-year later, he's the one who started the well, Hulk did, but he's the one who really took it to greater heights with Iron Man 1, and with this one kind of
You mean
being
Tony Stark?
Tony's.
You said Captain
Oh
America.
God, I'm so sorry, man. I mean Iron Man, Tony Stark. Yes, so I kind of see his arc there too, in terms of him being the one who sacrifices. If you really look back at the first movie, his first
Hmm.
movie, he played this millionaire philanthropist genius, but really cocky dude. Him coming and becoming this guy who sacrifices himself at the end might be an interesting arc in itself.
That is true. That is true. But even by the time of the first Avengers movie, he was willing to, right? Like he flew through the portal thing that the stone the Tesseract
Yeah,
created, and there was no guarantee he was coming back.
yeah.
Um, so I think he's already there,
Well,
right?
but Captain America did that too. I mean, he dived into water in the first one, right? Yeah,
That's true.
he
But
kind
he
of.
was always that guy. He didn't have that arc of starting as
Okay, yeah.
his arc was different. He was always that guy who would be willing to do that. His arc was more, having this or reaching this more nuanced understanding of the world and seeing things in more almost like shades of gray. The whole institutions of power or
Hmm.
the things that he's kind of stood for kind of fall apart a little bit on him. So it's a more subtle, different arc.
Well, I think it makes sense
So
because sorry, go ahead. Finish your thought.
go ahead. No. That was about the end of my thought.
No, I was just gonna, yeah, I was gonna agree with the fact that, yeah, his arc was more so going into, transforming from this guy who is a high on morals, high on his North Compass, sort of transforming into this rogue operative who breaks out of the system, and,
Right.
after the Civil War is protecting the one his best friend, no matter what his best friend may or may not have done. I agree with that, but I definitely don't think that. I'm just going back to an earlier point you made. I just don't think that Bucky Barnes is a good successor to Chris Evans, Steve Rogers. Just from a standpoint of, again, going back to our pre Larson conversation, I just don't see him having the personality or the charisma to pull off that character. So, in my opinion, I think they should just kind of rest the shield.
Right. I think that's what's going to happen. I don't think necessarily that Bucky's going to take over as Captain America. I think that might have happened in the comic books,
It
which
did.
is what you might be referring to. But yeah, I think they're just going to kind of retire that character and have Captain Marvel kind of take up that at least position in the team.
And I think they've foreshadowed Iron Man retiring too, in the sense that
Right.
they might have a kid, Morgan.
Yeah, and really, Iron Man's tried to retire since what,
Right.
like since I don't know, after Ultron. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's been kind of like, I'm kind of done for a while, but they keep dragging him back in, and maybe now he's like, another thing that's kind of be somewhat interesting is there are certain parallels between Doctor Strange and Tony Stark
Yeah.
in that. So I do wonder if he's going to be taking on that mantle to a certain extent.
Which I'm not complaining about because I think Benedict Cucumber Patch is great. I love him. Um,
Yes, everyone likes Benedict Cabbage Patch or whatever his name is.
um, all right, so this is a a good time to talk about Doctor Strange's point, or Doctor Strange's statement. Right, we're in the end game now. This is the only way, Tony. Do you think by that he's referring to time travel? Is that going to be the plot device?
Well, yeah. I mean, they've already released the promo pictures, images, well, really, video segments of them in essentially the quantum verse suits or whatever they are. So I think there's going to be something like that.
Well,
I'm not sure exactly what the details are going to be, but they're gonna force something that they're gonna either actually go back in time or they're going to do something that forces Thanos to undo it somehow or something like that. I've very highly I'm anticipating some kind of like basically comic book magic from the reality altering kind.
well, and I mean, I guess to add to that, it might also be why he believes that Tony needs to stay back, because maybe Tony is the one, since Pym is dead. Tony is the one who can actually take what Scott Lang has in his van and actually make it tech that can do the quantum realm time travel thing that they needed to do. without
Yeah.
really dodging through the randomness of the quantum realm as they have set it up.
Yeah, it could be that. It could even just be that from a, I don't know, from a like a leadership perspective, that they
Mm.
think they need that kind of strong, kind of almost technical role in the team or something like that. From a broader point of view.
Yeah,
Uh,
that makes sense, but I will say this that Russo brothers have in the past shown trailers that are wholly made up of scenes that are not in the movie. So it could also be that it's got nothing to do with that, which would be very
it,
interesting.
it would, and honestly, I mean, I think the most straightforward way to defeat Thanos, it's actually quite simple, and this theory's been floating around the internet for some time now, is that Ant-Man has this unique ability to get really, really small, and if he goes up Thanos's butt and then becomes really, really big, then what can Thanos do against that,
All right,
right?
here's my problem with that theory. Here's my problem with that theory. Have you ever had a ant crawl up your butt? Have you ever had that issue? Well, I
I
have.
mean, maybe.
I have.
Okay.
Not okay. Not to go into gory details here. You can feel that shit. Um, so an ant on Thanos's, I guess, butt cheeks, he will feel that shit. So I'm sure
But
that.
would he feel that in the middle of a battle? That's the question.
Oh, but then how does he get through the clothes? He'd have to go
I
quantum, and then how is he going to come back out? Those things are.
I mean,
I mean, the
I
theory.
don't think that's actually gonna happen. It
I
would be
know.
hilarious, but
I know, I'm debating it for the sake of it, but I do think that the other actually realistic theory is that they can just go up to Thanos and be like, "Hey, dude, you're in general you're pretty logical and analytical. Come to Earth and just see what the fuck has happened to Earth. I mean, it's in shambles. Your plan was so stupid it didn't work. You pretty much killed all of the plans too. Can you please just reverse this with your time stone?" I feel like that would be a reasonable way to approach the situation too.
yeah, but there wouldn't be a fight. There has to be a fight. I mean, let's be real. They all have fights in it, and honestly, that's why we're watching it, right? We want to see, explosions and space magic and stuff like that.
Well, okay, so going back to, I guess, the film universe and what may actually happen, there is another theory out there that says that when Thanos did the snap, he pretty much created a parallel universe, and
Yeah.
they reside in the Soul Stone, or they have a separate reality, and the quantum suits are basically just to go into a parallel universe. The distinction here is parallel universe versus time. Do you think that's possible?
It's possible. I mean, anything's possible. Nothing's really off the table right now. I will say though that, and it's technically not part of the MCU proper, but in the quasi MCU spinoff, Agents of Shield, time travel is a thing that they have actually approached before. So it would not be unprecedented for
Hmm.
there to be some level of time travel in quasi MCU. I say quasi because it's not entirely clear whether it's part of the actual canon or whatever. We won't get into
Okay.
that. So I mean, ultimately, I think it kind of ends up being almost the same thing. It's this quasi space magic that does a thing that forces another reality of one kind or another. So in my mind, I don't think it's that important of a distinction, but that's me.
Do you think they'll go back to the Battle of New York and all of that stuff in Avengers One? Because there were some
Ooh.
photos on the interweb that were showing filming that was being done in the same location, the same sort of costumes and things like that. Do you think they'll go back to that?
That would be interesting. I mean, it could be something just to kind of throw it off. I mean, let's be real. Every Avengers movie has basically taken part, at least some, in New York. So
Mm,
I don't
yeah.
know if that's necessarily anything definitive.
Well, and I think that w- if they're going to go back and collect all the stones before Thanos
Yeah,
does, I think then it might kind of make sense going back to that, at least from a cinematic purpose, going back to that time.
true.
Another theory I've heard, which is an interesting one, is that Ant Man goes back all the way to the 90s, and basically convinces Pym to make tech that is available for time travel by this time, present time. Also, why Pym randomly recruits Scott Lang to be the next Ant-Man. So that he's been watching him for years. That's basically because Ant-Man went back in time and told him so. I feel like if they do something around that, that'd be pretty cool. I don't know if they will.
Yeah, but y'all are thinking a little too hard and logically about comic books. I mean, yeah. So remember, kids, in the previous Avengers, Infinity Wars, a Norse god threw a lightning-powered hammer into a big purple dude's chest, and it presumably pierced his heart, but big purple dude was still able to wipe out half of creation. So, you know, there's a certain amount of hand waviness, and I don't think we need to apply too much logic
All
there.
right, all right. My last attempt to apply some logic here. What if this is a okay? What if there is time travel involved? What if they go back and well, they will bring back the dead. I mean, Black Panther and all those guys.
Yeah, it's gonna happen.
Right,
I mean, we know there's gonna be another Spider-Man movie.
right.
I mean, it's basically done already. We know there's gonna be another Guardians of the Galaxy movie, so these characters are coming back.
Right, but like, okay, they bring them back, but do you think that Marvel will be audacious enough to change reality based on the time travel?
Ooh, um, I think the safe way, and they've mostly always taken kind of that steady, measured, relatively safe, but just audacious enough path. I think they might change it some, but not dramatically, because if you do change it dramatically, it ruins some of that closure and payoff of watching these characters develop over the past 10 years.
Hmm.
Um, because if you just make it so that the previous timeline or whatever just literally didn't matter, then well, okay, why did we spend hundreds of dollars watching those movies?
Right.
Uh, so I don't think it would be that. There might be some small tweaks, but ultimately I think the structure would be still very much the same, and they're going to kind of pick up the story in terms of Phase 4, I guess it would be,
Hmm.
when more or less with the rest of the storylines intact.
So it won't be like a flashpoint like event.
No, I don't think it's going to be a big break or a total switch of something.
Okay. All right. So my last question, and then we'll sort of wrap up this discussion here. Since Disney has merged with Fox or acquired Fox and acquired X-Men and Deadpool and
Oof.
Fantastic Four, do you think they will introduce any of those, even hint at any of those characters or those worlds, even in the post-credit scenes, let's say? And A, do you think they will? B, do you think they should? Why or why not?
No and no,
Mm.
not at this point.
Yep, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, it's too crowded right now, and that's what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to retire some of their older characters through either death or actual retirement, and I think that's smart because at a certain point we have to get emotionally attached to new characters, and they have that bench there already, everywhere, right? We talked about Captain Marvel, we talked about probably Doctor Strange, maybe Thor will stick around or we'll be introduced to someone new. Who
Yeah,
knows?
I also think that they've sort of taken this journey of these two movies, starting with Thanos and then kind of going into the original Avengers 6. I really want them to keep it in that ecosystem. I really want them to close all those loops and story arcs and let like a viewer just walk out with, I'm guessing, a heavy heart and some bittersweet feelings and just kind of revel in that rather than, ooh, look
Right.
what we've got coming after this. Come back and watch some more of our movies and pay us all your money. I don't want that cash grab thing happening at the end.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, there wasn't an after credit anything for Infinity Wars, was there? I don't think there was. Uh,
There was one. There was the Captain Marvel pager.
oh, right. Yeah, that's true at the end, but that wasn't that bad. It was pretty brief. Um,
Yeah, and you knew that the movie was
you
coming
knew it was
out,
gonna
so
happen.
right.
Exactly. Yeah, I just don't see it. And also, once you start mixing the worlds like that in terms of out bringing stuff outside of what's established in the MCU, it gets weird. Like technically, Scarlet Witch's father is Magneto in
Right.
comic book world. It,
I've
it
heard
just
that.
gets let's just not mess with that, right? Maybe they'll do it later. Not now. Not in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and then I mean, when they introduced Scarlet Witch as a quote unquote miracle in the movie or in Age of Ultron, I think they just called that
Yeah.
an experiment gone wrong, or well, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. It was Nazi magic
Right.
tech, something basically.
Yeah, so I think we both are in agreement with that. Anyways, we're at the end of that conversation and discussion. I do want to say that we will be watching this movie over the weekend, and we will come back
Yes.
on Sunday and do a discussion and review on this movie. There will be a new guest joining us, so watch out for that.
Ooh.
And hopefully, we'll be happy with what we watch. If we're not, you'll hear it, and then someone else will probably be very angry at us. But we'll be back and make sure that you are here. Bo, do you have any last words?
Yeah, I mean, I fully expect Marvel slash Disney slash whatever you want to call it to not mess us up. They've had a very good track record so far, and especially the Russo brothers with Infinity
Yes.
War. So I'm hoping for and expecting a fun 3-hour ride.
And I think they claim that this is their best work. So, and I trust them because I think that they have a handle on what they're doing, based on everything that I've heard and read about them. Okay, before we go, guys, if you like this episode, please like, share, subscribe wherever you're getting this feed. If you don't, then even then, like, share, subscribe. Maybe also comment why you don't like it, and we can probably have a discussion. You can also find us on Facebook, Film Stop Podcast. Until next episode, guys. Bo, later.
See you.